Hi guys, good morning. Let's wait for 1 or 2 minutes. Yeah, let's get started because I think we've already waited long enough. So we can talk about a functional setup manager today. And this functional setup manager is it is basically a single user interface that is available in Fusion Cloud or that needs to be used to perform the setups related to any application for that matter. So I've logged into the ERP cloud application here. I've logged in as pin_IMPL user. And as I mentioned earlier, when I was covering the navigation, so you have a springboard here. You have this particular area is called as a springboard, and you have a navigator here. So in the springboard as well as in the navigator, you would be able to see the modules or work areas like you see receivables, order management, and you have my client groups, which shows you the HCM related work areas, right? So you have work areas available here, and when you click on those modules or menu icons, or it's also called as groups. When you click on them, you get to see the work areas available under them. And what can you typically perform from the work areas that you see under a module within the application? You would only be able to perform the transactions from this. So if I go into receivables and I go into billing, I would see the incomplete transactions showing up on the landing page. And if I click on manage transactions, so from this particular screen, all I would be able to do is manage billing related to a receivables module, meaning I would be able to create the transactions, create the customers, manage customers as well as the transactions. But before I could create transactions, say for example, before I could create an AR invoice, a functional consultant should have done the setups, right? So before the client could use the application, functional consultant would do the required setups, meaning he would define the required business units, he would set up the transaction sources, types, etc. So where will those setups be done from? You don't have a navigation options available within the individual work areas here. So the work areas that you see here, the work areas that you see in the springboard under a particular group or any group for that matter, or even if you look at the navigator, you would still see the same options. If you go to receivables, you would only have the work areas which would let you create transactions. But for you to be able to create transactions, that accounts receivable module should have been set up. All the receivable setups should have been done by finance functional consultant. And where does he do it from? They would do it from a screen called functional setup manager. How to access that screen? You have to click on the drop down. Under administration, you see a setup and maintenance option in here. So what role needs to be assigned to user for him to be able to see this particular section? That user needs to have application implementation consultant role. Remember, we talked about this in the security, right? So if you So the functional consultant would be clicking on the setup and maintenance screen, and that would take him into FSM work area, or something called as functional setup manager. So this page that you're seeing on screen, this is called as functional setup manager. And this is it's called so because you would be managing functional setups from this particular screen. So that's why it's called functional setup manager. I would explain all the options available in here. I would also explain how to use a configuration package to migrate functional setups from one instance to another instance. But please note that you won't be doing this in real time, but it would help you if you know all these concepts. You might be asked few questions about this in the interview, and you might also have to do some research on your own when you're trying to do some data load, or when you're trying to build a report. If you want to figure out what setups have been done, you should know how this FSM screen works. Okay, I would cover this particular topic in a greater detail than what you need to know as a technical consultant, but that would help you in case you want to change your profile as a techno-functional consultant at some point in time. Okay, so this particular user interface is called FSM, functional setup manager, because this can be used to manage functional setups. And this single user interface can be or is used to do the setups in all modules. It doesn't matter what module client is implementing. He might be implementing financials, he might be implementing Fusion Accounting Hub, he might be implementing financials or SCM, or he might be implementing, what do you say, the core HR modules as well. So it doesn't matter what module is being implemented by the client. They would perform setups using a single screen, whether it is a core HR setup or whether it is a financial setup. They would have to do it from here, from this particular screen. And we'll talk about that. We'll focus on FSM exclusively today. So we'll talk about what FSM is, what are the key concepts involved in there, and you will talk about all the options that are available here, like what is this, what is the functional area, what are the tasks, and all that stuff. And there are two approaches to manage setups. One approach is to use FSM, and there is another alternate approach called implementation project. So we'll talk about that as well, if time permits today, otherwise tomorrow. And then I'll also talk about a configuration package. I'll explain how we can use a configuration package, not just explain, we'll do a quick demo to understand how you can create a configuration package to import and export a setup from source instance and import it in a target instance or higher instance. Okay. So this functional setup manager screen, it provides an end-to-end solution like this. Like you would first select what modules a client wants to implement. Does he want to implement financials alone or financials, SCM, HCM? So where does he pick that up from? So first of all, he would go into this particular option. Okay, so you have, if you go into the navigator, if you expand all, if you search for offerings under my enterprise, you see an option called my offerings. So you click on that offerings, and when you click on that offerings, it would show you all the product families here. So it would show you offering is nothing but a product family. It is like financials, supply chain management, or core HR, or for HR, you've got three offerings. So the offerings on a high level, you could think of them as a product family that we have seen in the first day slide. And within this particular instance, remember I mentioned that in the single Fusion Cloud application, you could enable financials, and you could also enable HCM related. You could enable FSCM cloud, which is ERP cloud, as well as HCM cloud as well. You could enable multiple offerings in a single Fusion Cloud application. And you could, if you want to see what modules are enabled or what product families are enabled in this application, you could come into this particular screen. You see compensation management. This is like a payroll in HCM. Yes, it is enabled. And you see financials. And you could also see that, yes, the financials, it is also enabled. And if you want to figure out what modules are enabled in this, you could click on opt-in features. And that would show you what all features have been opted into by the client. Okay. So in some cases, clients might not implement all the modules in financials. What modules you have in financials? You have AP, AR, GL, fixed assets, right? And you have expenses as well. Not all the clients use all the modules that you have in financials. Some clients might use only GL. Some clients might use GL, AP. Some clients might use all the modules you have in financials. So depending on the scope of the implementation project, first you have to opt in for the required offerings. What are the modules that you want to implement? So first of all, you decide what modules or what offerings you want to enable, meaning what is it HCM cloud implementation or HCM plus financials is what you decide first. And that is like deciding the offering. And then within the offering, you would have to decide what modules need to be implemented within that particular offering. So in financials, is it all 5 modules or 6 modules, or is it only GL that needs to be implemented? So that particular option would be, you could control it. You could opt into the modules by clicking on this. If you don't want to implement GL, so if you notice here, financials implementation cannot be done without GL. So you don't have this. This is not an optional element. It's okay. So financials implementation, it has to have a GL. Whether you have other modules like APAR is up to you. So if you're not, if a particular client is not using fixed assets, you will take it off. They don't need it, they will take it off. So within, you would select the product families first. Within the product family or offering, you would select what functional areas you want to implement or what modules you want to implement. Okay, so you could enable it and you come out of this. So that is what we mean by opting in for the modules first. And then what functional consultant would do? The functional consultant would be performing the setups from the FSM screen. How to go to FSM screen? Click on the drop down. Click on setup and maintenance. Okay, so first you would plan what offerings you want to implement. And if you click on the drop down, whatever you see here are nothing but the offerings that are enabled in this particular application. Okay, so you would have the offerings enabled. And if you pick up a specific offering, say for example, if you pick up financials, it would show the functional areas that you have enabled within the financials. Functional areas are nothing but, you could think of it as a modules. You have GL, you have payables, you have payments, you have fixed assets, expenses. So all these are nothing but modules. Think of them as functional modules. So yes, you would first pick up, you would first plan your implementation. What modules need to be, what offerings need to be implemented, whether it is financials plus HCM or only financials. And then you would enable those offerings. And when you enable the offerings, you would enable only the modules that you need to implement. And then the functional consultant would complete the setups. And from that same screen, you also have an option to deploy the setups from test to production or maybe SIT to UAT. So you have an option to migrate setups from one instance to another instance. How do you do it? You do it with the help of config packages. We'll see how to do it. And the same screen can also be used to manage the setups. Okay, so these are the things that you could perform from FSM screen. And this is what you have. You have offerings, and under each offering you have functional areas, and under functional areas you have features. Now we will park the PPT for a while now, or for some time, and we will focus on the user interface now. So first thing a functional consultant would do is, this would be used by all the functional consultants, HCM, finance, or any PPM or SCM. They would have to come into this screen and do the setups. So the first thing you have to do is pick up the offering here at the top, and based on the offering that you pick up, the functional areas would change. Okay, so we are in compensation management now, and let me change it to financials. You notice that based on the offering you select, the modules would change, and these functional areas would be listed down in a same order in which they need to be set up. So normally, whenever you set up a whenever you do the financials configuration, you do the configurations in the same order that is listed down here. You would initially set up the users, you would create enterprise structures or a profile, and then you would perform setups related to GL. You would create the legal address, legal entity, and other stuff, and then you would configure your GL module. After that, you would go ahead and create other subledger modules or configure other subledger modules like payables, payments, etc. So the functional areas would be listed down here, and these functional areas would be listed down in the same order that they need to be set up. So even if you are quite new to performing setups, if you're an MBA fresher who have just started an organization or who have just started your career as a finance functional consultant, you don't have to worry. You could just follow the order that is given here while doing the setups. And when you select a specific functional area, say for example, let's pick up legal structures. Whenever you select a specific functional area, it would show you a required task that need to be done. Task is nothing but a setup. Required tasks that need to be configured or setups that need to be done for legal structures functional area. And you notice that by default, this would show you only the required tasks. And you also have a search box here. We'll come to the search box in a moment. But if you see here, for legal structures, for setting up legal structures, these are the key tasks that you have to perform, or the required tasks. You have a drop down there and you could change it to all tasks. And if you change it to all tasks, you might see some additional configuration options as well. So you see that there are a few more tasks that you could perform, but these are purely optional tasks. You might or might not have to do it. Okay. And these the tasks that are listed down here, once you select a functional area, these would also be listed down in the same order that they need to be set up. Okay, so you with FSM, you get that guided access. In the sense, even if you don't know in which order you need to do the module setups or in which order you need to do the task setups, I'm talking about a functional consultant. Whatever I explained today, you won't be doing that in real time. And if you're thinking, why the hell are we discussing it if you don't do it in real time? It would help you at one point or the other when you're doing the development work, be it a BA development or doing the data load, or maybe at a later point, you would definitely need these concepts, but you won't do it on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so you would have the functional areas listed down in a sequence that they need to be set up, and the tasks also listed down in the same sequence that they need to be set up. So you get this guided access advantage with FSM screen. And you also have a search box here. If you search for a task here, what application would do is it would search for that task, not just in this functional area, but it would search across all the functional areas available within this particular offering. If you search for a task, it would search for that particular task within all the functional areas under that particular offering. If I just say ABC, I search it, what does it say? No tasks associated with enabled functional areas of this offering were found. So what it means is there is no task with this name in all the functional areas enabled under this particular offering. So if you say, I'm in legal structures now, and I could say create user. I could just say user and type it in. And it would show me all the tasks that has user in the name. And it also shows me the functional area under which that particular task is available. So if you see this run user and role synchronization process, it's available under initial users, a functional area, but that is still showing up even though I am in a legal structures functional area. So this particular search box works like a local search, not local to the functional area, but local to the offering that we are in. You cannot search for a HCM task in here. You cannot search for a SCM task in here because it would search for the task within the offering, within all the functional areas in that particular offering. And whenever you select a specific functional area, you would have, by default, it would display required tasks. And if you change this to all tasks, it would display all the tasks, including the optional ones. And let's change it to required. And for some of the tasks, you have an option to set up a scope. Okay, so this setting up scope would help you to perform setups quite easily, especially the functional consultants. So if you're probably setting up a legal entity, if you have to set up a legal entity, you have to perform these steps. You have to perform these setups. You have to first create a legal address, and then you have to create a legal entity. And after you create a legal entity, you will have to enter the registrations. You have to create a reporting unit and reporting unit registrations. So when you perform these tasks, the related tasks, the tasks related to the legal entity, it doesn't make sense to push users to or the functional consultants to select the legal entity which they want to register again, right? So if you want to perform related setups, what you could do was you could set you could select a specific BU or a legal entity, whatever is applicable. You could set that up as a scope here so that whenever you go into that particular task, say for example, if I go into manage legal entity restrictions, you could see that a scope is set up as US1 legal entity. So that would by default show me the legal entity registrations of US1 legal entity. Okay, so there are two registrations for US1 legal entity, right? So this is how setting up a scope helps. Scope, if you set up a scope, when you go into that particular task, it would show you the data related to that particular scope which has been applied. So you could change the scope. You could wipe it completely if you want. Yeah, you could. You could select a different scope if you want. You can change it to Australia legal entity, apply and go to task. And you would notice that that scope would get applied across, and you could see the Australia legal entity details in there. And if you cancel it, you could see that that particular legal entity has been applied as a scope here. And you could also say, for example, if you're going to manage legal reporting unit, it would ask you to first select the scope. And you could, after you select the scope, you have to pick up. Yeah, you basically the setting the scope here. It's nothing but setting the context for those particular setups that you have to do. Okay, so this is one way to perform the setups. If you are a finance functional consultant, you could select the financials offering here, pick up the legal structures, or you could go in the same sequence and start configuring the functional work areas. And you could pick up a module, all required tasks would be displayed, go ahead and set them up. And then you could change this to all tasks, see if any of the optional tasks would help you. And if they help you, or if you have to do those setups, do them as well. And that's how you proceed with the configurations. This is one way. And what is another way? What is the downside with this approach? What is the upside with this approach? What are the advantages with this approach? The advantages is the moment you pick up a offering, functional areas would be listed down in an order they need to be set up. And if you pick up a functional area, the tasks also would be listed down in a same order they need to be set up. So you get that guided access. That is one of the biggest advantage of using FSM. But what is the downside with this approach? Even though the client is not implementing, or even though we are not implementing all the modules in financials, by default, all of them will show up here. Of course, you can take them off from the functional areas, but even if you go into, yeah, you could take off a functional area from the opt-in screen. But even if you take off the functional area, some of the functional areas that you are not implementing, say for example, if you're not implementing fixed assets, you could take it off from the opt-in screen. I've just shown you how to do it, right? So you could take them off, but even if you take it off, within this particular section, you might see some tasks or functional areas that you are not necessarily implementing for the client. So it might often lead to the confusion. And within a functional area also, say for example, if you take GL module, there could be 100 plus setups that you have to do. And not every client need to use all those 100 plus setups. There might be some intercompany related setups. There might be a few more setups, which not every client might need. In such cases, it might get confusing. By default, if you pick up an offering, by default, it will show all the functional areas. If you pick up a functional area, it would show all the tasks. So to avoid this confusion, because functional consultants might end up configuring something that they don't have to really that they don't have to really configure. So to avoid that, what you could do is you could go ahead and create an implementation project instead. You click on manage implementation projects, and you could create a new implementation project. And in that new implementation project, you could give it a name. You could probably say UG Fin implementation project. Click on next. And when you create the implementation project, you could pick up only the functional areas or only the offerings that you have to implement. You could pick up only the offerings that you want to implement. Say, for example, it's a pure financials implementation project. I don't have to implement anything else. So you would pick up financials in there, you expand it, and you get to see all the modules available in financials. So do you want to implement, you don't see GL here because GL would get added automatically. Without GL, you can't implement financials. And apart from GL, do you want to implement AP? Expenses, fixed assets, you can pick and choose what modules you want to implement. Say, for example, if it's a GL plus AP plus AR implementation project. So you select only those three modules. GL would be selected by default, and a supplier invoice processing means AP, accounts payable. Customer invoice processing means AR, because it's a receivables, right? Customer would pay you, you would receive amount from them, so it comes under AR. So you pick them up, and then what you could do, if these three are the only modules that you are implementing, you could pick them up and you could click on save and open project. So within a particular offering, so with implementation project gives me all the freedom that I need. I can pick and choose the offerings that I want to implement, and within a particular offering, I'll show you once the project is loaded now, that you could only pick up or you could take off all the tasks that you don't have to configure. Okay, so what the functional lead would do is in real time, it won't be even done by the functional consultant who is a junior or a mid-level. Probably a functional lead would define an implementation project, and he might implement or he would include only the tasks that are required for that particular implementation project. So as you could see, the moment you select those configurations at those two modules, you could see these tasks showing up now, right? So if you want to implement GL, AP, and AR, you have to perform these many tasks or these configurations. You have to do the common configurations first, common application configuration, common financials configuration. Then you have to do invoice payment, AP and AR configurations. And within these configurations, you have individual setups in there, like supplier configuration, disbursements, etc. So if you don't need any particular module, any particular sub module, or any particular task, if you don't have to set it up, all you have to do is pick it up and then you have to delete it. As simple as that. So this implementation project would give me that fine-grained control. I can pick and choose, or I would create a project with only the tasks that I need to implement for that specific project, because I know the scope of the project, right? Later on, if the scope changes, if I have to add in another functional task, I could click on this plus icon and add the task back in. So that's one of the advantage of implementation projects. Okay, you could include the offerings that you want to implement and pick up only the tasks that you need. And apart from this, you could see this assign task and status, right? So implementation project would also help you to assign the tasks to a individual functional consultants, and you could also track them to closure. And of course, you might argue that in real time, you would have a status calls at least once in 2 or 3 days, and you have a project managers who has 8 hours a day to keep track of what the status is, or to manage the project status, right? So that is one way you could manage the project status offline, or the functional setups. You could directly ask the functional consultant to see how far they have progressed. And if you use implementation project, you have option available right within this to assign the task to a specific consultant. If you have, say, 2 consultants working under you, and you are a finance functional lead, you could assign those tasks to individual consultants. So you could assign them to, say, for example, if this payables setup needs to be done by, say, a specific user. You pick up that task, assign task, and I could assign it to a specific user. Okay, I will say that fin_impl needs to do this particular task, or I might say fin_impl1. Hopefully that user exists. Okay, let's pick up this specific user. So I want this particular user to perform this particular task. So this is another advantage that you get with implementation projects. So you could assign tasks to the users, you could put a due date in there, and you could track them to closure. It also helps you from that standpoint. Okay, and let's go back to the PPT now. So what are the benefits of FSM? You get that guided access. You would the task list or the functional areas in which they were listed down. You get that. So you get that guided access, and you have it's the same interface for all applications. It doesn't matter whether you're implementing financials or HCM. You would be using the same functional setup manager screen that you have seen earlier, and it's configurable. You would pick and choose the offerings that you have to implement. And you also have an option to import and export data. We'll see this in action in a while. And maintenance is also easy because this particular screen that you have seen, let me click on done here. So this particular screen, the FSM screen that you have seen, this particular screen will be used by functional consultants to do the initial setups. And the same screen would also be used by the end users, not the end users or the client functional consultants. Post go live, if they have to do some changes in the setups, they would also be doing the same, using the same screen to do the setups. So you would use this screen to do the setups as well as to maintain them. So if you have to define a new legal entity, a client probably a couple of years later, if they have to define a new legal entity and do the related setups, they would come into the same screen and do the setups. Okay, and this validate setup data and reports errors, this would help you, or this would come into picture when you use FSM to migrate the configuration packages. So if there are some some related setups that are getting missed out, it would flag them. Okay, that would help you as well to some extent. And to manage setup data, there are two approaches that you could take. You could take a functional area based approach, which is what I've just explained initially, the FSM or functional area based approach, or you could use an implementation project based approach. Functional area based approach means you pick up an offering, and then after that you would go into the individual functional areas and you would start performing the setups. That is a functional area based approach. And the other approach is to create an implementation project. Okay, and yep, you have two options that you could choose. The two options to choose from. Some projects use this approach, some projects use this particular approach. There's no a rule of thumb which says that you use this or use this. And you know what are the advantages and disadvantages of using these two approaches, right? If it's an implementation project based approach, you could have only the tasks that you need for an implementation project. If it's a functional area based, you get that flexibility, like you get that guided access, and you have few more options available in there, or which would help you to do the setups easily. Okay, and we have done this. And there is a concept called configuration packages. So when you in Fusion Cloud implementation projects, if you get your setups right in one instance, that is enough. You don't have to repeat the same setups. The functional consultants need not spend those 2 or 3 weeks to set up the application, to set up the financials module or the financials offering again in a SIT or UAT. If you have got your setups right in one particular instance, after the setups are done, before you create any transactions, what you could do is you could export the setups from a dev instance, and you could load it into a SIT or UAT instance. So in just a couple of hours time, you could migrate all the setups from one instance to another instance, and that would save tons of effort, to be frank. and apart from saving the effort, it also takes out the scope for human errors. So even though it's the same consultant performing the same setups, there is a scope for errors to creep in, right? So a functional consultant, when they might have done everything correctly in a dev, in SIT, when they do the setups, they might miss some related setups, or they might end up with some typos, or right. So all such errors, human errors, could be avoided if you use FSM screen or FSM to migrate the setups. How do you migrate the setup? After you have done the setups in a source instance, you could create a configuration package, and in the configuration package, you would export the data from the source. Okay, you would export the data from the source, and that would generate a configuration package file, which is basically a zip file. And you would pick that zip file up, the configurations would be exported in XML format. You would pick that zip file up and you would load it into a target instance. Okay, let's do a quick hands-on to see how this works. It's always better with a hands-on, right? So if we, let me go ahead and create a, and before I create a project, let me perform one setup in there. I'll go into organization structures and I go into manage business unit. I would create a new business unit. So what is a business unit? What are the enterprise structures available in Fusion Cloud application? We'll focus on it tomorrow. Okay, for now, just think of business unit as an operating unit, and the transactions happen in Fusion Cloud application, or a business happen at this particular level, at the business unit level. Be it AP, AR, or any module or purchasing modules, all the transactions typically happen at a business unit level. And that's why it's called business unit, where the actual business happen. Let's give it a name. You say UGBU. And let's put it in a common reference data set. We'll also talk about what a reference data set is tomorrow. There's a long story attached to it. You can click on Save and Close. Okay, so I've created a BU called UGBU, a new BU. And let's say I want to migrate that particular business unit from this instance to a higher instance. I just want to show you one simple setup task, migration from one instance to another instance. The process would remain the same even if you have to migrate the entire financials configuration. And if I want to migrate that business unit from this instance to a higher instance, what I have to do is I would go into the configuration packages. You're going to manage configuration packages, and you would create a new package, configuration package. And for you to create a configuration package, you have to pick up an implementation project. And this should bring something to your mind. Wait, you said that when you have to perform a setups, you could take two approaches, right? You could take a functional area based approach or an implementation project based approach. It doesn't matter what approach you take. When you have to migrate the configurations, you would definitely need an implementation project. Okay, so even if you are using functional area based approach to do the setups, you would have to create an implementation project at least for the sake of migrating the setups. Okay, so you would pick up the implementation project that you have created, pick that one up. Now what we will do is we will not pick that one up, because that particular implementation project includes all the tasks related to GL, AP, and AR. Remember, if you try to export a configuration package with all the three modules, it would take quite a bit of time. So what functional consultants normally do is, if they export the entire financials module, they set it up as an overnight export. So before they log off for the day, they would set up the export, and by the time they log in tomorrow morning, they would have the entire configuration package exported. So since we don't have enough time, that much time in the session, what we would do is, I won't use this particular project which has all the AP, AR, and GL tasks. Instead, I would create a new implementation project, and I would include only one setup task in that. So I would create a new implementation project. And I would call it as UG config package demo project. And I will not pick up any modules by going into the next screen. I would just click on save and open the project. And that would ensure that the project gets created without any offerings. And what I can do is I can click on the plus icon here. See, in this particular project, there is no task assigned, right? No task is selected. So I click on that, change it to a tasks, and I would say business manage business unit. Okay, I would pick this one up, click on apply and click on done. And I've selected only a specific task here. So you click on done. So I've created a project with only a specific task in there, manage business units. Click on done. And what I would do was I would go in to a configuration packages screen. I would create a new configuration package now. And let me select the implementation project that I've just created with only one task called manage business units. It's showing a warning message which says it doesn't contain any offerings, but that's okay. I'm okay with it. I'm doing this deliberately. But usually when you do, or when you export a project, or when you create a configuration package, you would pick up a project which has offerings in there. You would pick up a project which has a financials or HCM offering, and you could pick and choose what is it that you want to export. In some cases, you might want to export just the definition of the implementation project to a higher instance, in which case you could select it as setup task list only. And what that means is only the task list that you have picked up in that implementation project, or basically the skeleton of the project, will be migrated. If you select setup task list and setup data, setup task list will be migrated and the setup data as well. So you click on next. And you could see that the business unit, that particular task is showing up now. And I also have an option to implement a scope in here. I can also plug in a scope here and restrict what business units I intend to export to higher instance. So I click on the plus icon here, and I can say, pick up only the UGBU that we have created just now. Pick that one up, save and close. And this would ensure that only the UGB business unit would get exported. Click on next, and you could run it as soon as possible, submit it. And what this would do, you get a warning message which says that the packet definition would be locked for future modifications. That's okay. Click on done. And let the export run here. We would log into another instance now. Looks like the password has been changed for ESEG instance. Let me get the password, guys. I'll pause the screen share. Well, looks like the password of fin_IMPL and KC Brown has been changed to something else in this particular instance. I'm not sure who has done it. What we could do was go to tools, security console, and we could reset the password. Go to users, search for fin_IMPL. And you could see that the user is locked. Someone tried to log in with a wrong password. You just have to unlock it. Let's see if Casey Brown is also logged. Yeah, this user is also logged. Let's go ahead and unlock it. And if you unlock the user, the password doesn't change. And why am I interested in this instance now? Because we're going to load the setups that we exported from ESEB instance to ESEG instance. We need a target instance, right? So that's why I've logged in here. And you see the export process. You could see that yes, the project configuration package has been generated successfully. You see the completed successfully status in there. You click on the download button and you have an option to download the configuration package from there. You click on download configuration package, you have a zip file generated and you could double click on it. You see a folder generated, and within the folder, if you see, you have a setup task list that is exported, and you also have a business object data in there. And within the business object, remember we exported only the business units, right? Within the business object, you're seeing only BUs because that's the only task that we have included in there. And if you expand it, you see the business unit in there, the business unit information. And if you see, there are XML files generated. If you open up this a business unit XML file, you would see that there is only one row in there because we have plugged in a scope. And what did we select as a scope? UG business unit as a scope. So that's why only that particular business unit configuration has been exported from ESEB instance. And if you go into ESEG instance, if you first verify if you have that business unit or not, go to setup and maintenance. Go to financials, organization structures, go to manage BU. UGBU. This is a BU that we are trying to import. So we don't have that BU as you could see in this particular instance. So what we would do is we would import that configuration package that we have exported here from a source instance into the target instance. How do you import it? You again have to go to FSM screen in the target instance. And you click on the task ribbon. You click on this manage configuration packages. And you have an option to upload a configuration package. So you click on upload, choose file, and you can go to downloads, pick up the zip file that has been exported from a source instance. Click on get details. That would get the implementation project details, which implementation project has been used to create that configuration package. Click on submit. So that gets uploaded now. And what does it say? It says that implementation project is available in manage implementation projects now. So in case you want to migrate only the definition of the project, it's a confirmation that yes, project is imported successfully. You could see that it has uploaded. And now if you want to import the setup data that you have in this configuration package, you have to click on this import setup data option. And you could take this box if you want it to pass after each and every error. Click on next. Since there is only one, you would pick that one up. In case you want to pause the import process when error occurs at that particular node. So this is like putting in a checkpoints in between. If you are importing 10 tasks, you could put in checkpoints in between where you want this import process to pause and wait for your instruction. I don't have to make it pause. It doesn't make sense because there's only one task in there. You go ahead and submit it. So this would start importing the setups that are there in that particular configuration package. You see that it is in progress at the moment. And once this is done, you should see that that new business unit that we have created in ESEB showing up in this ESEG instance. You could see that it's done at the moment. You could, yeah, you could look at the results and the reports that are generated to verify whether it is imported or not. Or you could directly go to FSM screen. Since it's only one setup, you could directly validate within the application. Go into financials. You go into organization structures. Pick up manage BU. And you could search for UGBU now. You could see that the BU has been imported successfully from the previous instance to this particular instance. And you open it, you will be able to see the details in that. Okay, you could see the details in that. Okay. Any questions, guys? Any questions in what we covered today? Okay, looks like no.
Hi Prasad, Nivruti here.
Yes, Nivruti.
So, are we able to migrate all the setups which we are doing, like, or there is any specific type of setup we can migrate?
You can do everything, or you can do only a specific task if you want. And remember, I have shown you this demo, right? Like migrating the setups. You won't be doing it in real time. It's a job of the functional consultant to set up the applications and migrate the setups as well. This is not your task in real time. But yes, when it comes to migrating the setups, you could do all at a time. You could do one at a time. If you have value sets and if you want to migrate them, you could do only them. Only migrate value sets. You could do it. You have that choice in there.
Okay.
Okay.
There, one more thing. There is, you have shown there are two options: the setup list and setup data. So, while we are exporting the
Correct.
setups, so at that time, like you mean setup data means you are like transactional data you are able to migrate in that case, or like
No, the setup data. If setup data means the setups that you are migrating. So since we selected setup data also, that's why the business unit is a setup, right? So that's why that UGBU has been migrated. If you don't select setup data, only the structure of the implementation project gets migrated. Only the task list, nothing else would get migrated. It's not the transaction data. So if you say task list plus setup data, whether you want the setups to be migrated, yes or no. In some cases, you might want to only migrate the implementation project definition to a higher instance, right? That is the first option.
Right.
So to answer your question, Jyoti, there's no fixed time that configuration package takes. It depends on the number of offerings that you include within it. You normally include only one offering within a configuration package, and if it's a medium to complex implementation project, it would take at least a few hours for the export process to get over. So that's why we usually run this as an overnight process. So the functional consultants would do it as an overnight process.
Yeah, why I asked this question is because you have checked that option. If the process errors out, then you can pause it.
No, that is for import. Export is fine. Export also, both the options would take same amount of time. But when you are importing it, you have that option to pause whenever a particular import task errors out, because you might want to verify if something has gone wrong, if there is any dependent task in there, right? So that's why you have that option.
Yeah. So if the import job errors out and it paused, and we cannot do it overnight, right?
You will have to pick it up next day morning, see what the error is, resolve it, and then resume the process. Yeah.
Okay.
It will not time out, in case that is what you're asking for.
Yeah.
It will not time out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time. We'll meet again tomorrow. Please try this out in the instance. Everything that we do hands-on, please try it out at your own convenience, and let me know if you have any questions. Okay, thank you guys.